Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help patients trust the products they depend on. And when we're talking to guests like our guest today, what we learn is how they help enable that happen. And we're not talking about manufacturing. We're not talking about typically your neighborhood pharmacy. You're talking about compounding, and you're talking about what that involves and the risks, and how does someone like our guest help address those risks. As you may know, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA regulated products. So if you think about drugs, wonder about devices, consider cannabis, or are curious about compounding, this is the podcast for you. As a lawyer, I do have to say this, not intended to be legal advice. And especially with our guest today, we both have to say not intended to be clinical advice. I do these podcasts because they are a lot of fun. I get to talk to really special guests like our guest today, and I get to learn something new. However, I do like to know that people are listening. I do like to know that people are trying to come back and hear more about what we're talking about. So if you like what you hear, please like, please subscribe, please share if you know other people who might be interested. Um, and if you want to find me, you can always find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or go to our website, darshantalks.com. Our guest today is the VP of Gates Healthcare. He has a long history in non-sterile and sterile formulations and therapeutics of endocrinology, pain management, and other disease states. He's a subject matter expert on compounding pharmacy, on therapeutics. And I'm starting to run out of air, but he's also he's a former professor in academia. So our guest for today, we're really excited, really lucky to have him. We've had him before, Dr. Ken Speidel. Ken, how are you?
Hey, very good. Very good. Thanks for that introduction, counselor. Much appreciated.
It's good to see you. We
Good to
had
see
a
you.
very brief conversation before we started. We were talking about just how things are changing, and you talked a little bit about your recent experiences. Specifically, you're starting to travel. My dog seems to agree. Um,
Just so he or she doesn't want to travel right now outside.
he loves going outside.
Okay.
He loves the outside. So here's my question: how are you dealing with the changes in the environment? Are you dealing well with traveling, and how's that been to people you talk to?
Yeah, great question. Good lead. It is such a lot of my travel historically has been between continents. So going over the pond and then going way over the pond in Australia and Asia and all that. I've been very blessed with opportunities of such, but as you would only imagine, those things shut down pretty hard. And so there's industries over there, there's people over there that are trying to figure out, what I and others do to try to supplant. Not that we're, at the pinnacle of pharmacy practice by any means, but when people want to up their game and then they find out there's this little center of excellence that can assist and maybe kind of translocate some of those activities in their countries, they're pretty stagnant right now. And you can only do so much virtually. And so we used, I and folks from my organization, Gates Healthcare Consulting, we would go over there and we would supplant some of these concepts and some of these standards. And counselor, but there's a lot of countries that really have no standards of practice. And they say, well, you have USP. Well, not all of them endorse that. Many do, but not all. If they do, they don't really have a compliancy to that. And then when some event occurs, it's like, now what do we do? And then the regulators, sounds familiar like to the United States, and the regulators amp it up and go on steroids and then overshoot what they need to do. So that has been a problem. Obviously, me not being able to get there, as well as those folks being stagnant in terms of lockdowns. So a lot of lockdowns. Have not traveled outside of the United States. I think my last travel was just at the end of 19, and I had some big ones scheduled, and obviously those were canceled. So yeah, it's affected me now here continentally. It's good. I used to do a lot up in Canada, and they're pretty well locked down. So that's down as well. So I think the aftermath of that is going to be that people are not even close to the standards. they're just not moving. They're just staying where they are, even though the regulators are really busy because they still got paid through this whole thing. And so the regulators are really busy promulgating all these things and then doing these virtual kind of drive. Here's my phone doing these drive. Oh, here it is. You know, here, show me that. Show me that. It's kind of interesting because you know, and most of you folks on this call, you can't get a perspective of the quality of an organization through a cell phone. And how do you take the cell phone legitimately within a clean room environment? And I do a lot of that. I do a lot of these assessments. And how do you take it legitimately? Are there ways? Sure. But it's not something we really want to do. And you don't get a good, clear look at things. It's a cursory review. And you really, you know, a lot of this has to do with education. And I do a lot of education on site. It's not that, hey, I see this deficit, but you know, a lot of consultants come in and say, oh, deficit, 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 deficit. Boy, you guys have a problem. And then walk out the door. Sounds like a regulator, doesn't it? So the consultant that you hire comes in and says, hey, you got a problem. See you later. But what I do and what my team does is we educate. Here's your gap. Here's the standard. Here's you. Let's figure out how we get it. And so it's a hand-holding thing. So it's ongoing, obviously, but here's some suggestions. And sometimes they're simple, but sometimes they're complex. So interesting question.
Oh, there's so many questions I want to ask based on that, but I'm going to start with the beginning one, which is I'm familiar a little bit with the laws in India. And one of the things I was curious about at one point, this is going back several years, is what do they say about compounding? And surprisingly, they're very silent about the topic. Yeah. So my question for you is, when you're going across the world and you're advising these individuals, these companies, maybe these governments, what do you find yourself talking about? Because in the end, what you can do is often limited by what their regulatory system will allow. So how do you even start addressing an issue like that? Because if someone goes, I have people here who need customized products that can help them.
Right.
How do you go, but your laws don't even allow that, don't contemplate that?
You know, I cannot even begin to try to be an expert in all these different federal laws and all these different country laws. But the advantage is you need to know what good looks like. And good is universal. It really is. And if you see somebody doing something that is against, I'll say, a standard of practice in the industry that's going to result in something is going to be adulterated, inferior, compromise the patient, then obviously we have to say this is what good looks like. Now, every time I go to a place, I do get a cursory review. I always preface it and say, I am not licensed in your country. I am not an expert in, let's say I'm in the Philippines. And by the way, the Philippines has an FDA, but it's not our FDA. And their FDA looks at things differently. And then you go into UK, and then UK says, well, we're going to have these kind of large compounders, kind of like our 503Bs, kind of do these things. And then you can only do so many other things, and so much the chemicals aren't available, the therapeutics aren't necessarily. The practitioners prescribing this are very naive in a lot of these countries. And so it's like, okay, we may have this formulation we can teach people how to do, but the prescribers are saying, I don't even know what to prescribe for. Yeah, we heard your dog bark in the back, but the reality of it is can you do any compounding for veterinarian patients, for vet patients? And if so, what's your restriction? Is it, not that it's your dog, but does it go into the food supply, and how does it, and what is acceptable in the food supply in all these different countries and all that? So I do a cursory review and try to understand it, but there are significant gaps. And you know, as an attorney, what drives a lot of this is if there's an event that results in something quite tragic, God forbid it, but it happens, then if the legislature says, okay, we have to protect the public, let's get this going. And so it elevates the state. Now, Australia is a perfect example. Australia was kind of a bit laissez-faire many years ago. I've been going there, I think I've been there 28 times maybe. And when I first started going there, they were fairly naive. And then some events occurred, and then they looked at the US and the events that occurred in the US, and then they amped up the game and said, hey, we have to do this. Now, a lot of them decided to maybe take the USP standards and put them in a blender and then put a special sauce in there. And then they spun it around and they got this special sauce. Well, sometimes the special sauce doesn't taste very good. And it's like, we got to put something else in this, and try to adjust it. But, and they're trying to grow through it. Instead of somebody saying, I'm just going to adopt, and I'm not saying USP is perfect or any of that. It's getting better. But there are some standards that are problematic even in the USP, but very problematic in other countries. Other countries, you can't even anticipatorily compound. In other words, if you can anticipate something you're going to do, let's say, today is Wednesday, say you're going to do something on Friday, well, you might be allowed to do that, but you can't do it in preparation for the next week. It's just right there. And I don't care if you have 50 of these things going to lined up, they're all individual kind of things. So doesn't really preclude a whole lot from working smart, not hard. So, and the economy of scale. But yeah, these countries are very, very unique, and you have to know, but it's sad because there's huge deficiencies that are occurring. And sometimes it's kind of a wild, wild west. You can do that? You can give it this kind of expiry date, which I'll call BUD, which is more appropriate, but those not familiar with the terminology. You can do that with all the physiochemical and physiochemical stability and all this stuff and sterility. Oh yeah, we can do that. So anyway, but other ones are pretty restrictive, and sometimes it's like they can barely even do anything. Like you look at Germany, and they can't do a whole lot. So India, I've not had the pleasure, so I can't speak for that, my friend.
Fair enough, but let me ask you a question about that though. Who's actually inviting you? Is it a government going, we need this for our people? Is it a company going, we see a demand? Is it a person going, I see my patients needing it and I need to learn? Like who's typically the audience?
Yeah, well, a company is usually commissioning me to go over there, and I work with a wonderful company that has branches out in these other countries and other areas, and so I've been very, very fortunate to work with them. And originally, I have gone to say, okay, I'm going to teach, and that's predominantly what I do. I teach, but then oftentimes they'll say, hey, I need you to help this guy out or whatever, and go check things out or whatever as an enhancement to their services. So go in there, and sometimes it's a courtesy call. Sometimes it's a call to help them out. So, but a lot of it is teaching them the standard, what good looks like. Whether it's in a lab formulating something, whether it's in an aseptic lab, whether it's in a non-sterile lab, whether it's a didactic saying, okay, this is your environment, this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to formulate that. I always look at things, Darshan, I don't care where the origins are. I try to look at it saying, okay, if this is going to be a commercial product, and yes, pharma, all you folks out there, I get it. I have some experience in that world. It's entirely different. I get it. But when you're formulating something specific for a patient, I like to actually take achievable principles of CGMP and apply those. And I know you say, well, no, we got this whole, batch record and we have all this validation. I get all that. But the reality of it is if we have in the United States, we have 503A, that's that iron triangle, pharmacist, patient, prescriber triangle. Okay, that's 503A. And then 503B is the compounding outsourcer. So then they apply to CGMP. But can't we do a 503A plus? Can't we add a little plus sign to that and just say, hey, let's just be compliant with the USP, which a lot of people do, but why just being compliant with the USP is just saying you're good. No, actually, you're compliant. You're not even good. You're just compliant. Why don't we become good? Why don't we become better? And I just say, I don't even know what best is. I don't even know what the best manufacturer is, but the bar. So I don't even say best practice. I say better practice. So 503A plus. So I teach a lot of that. Well, no matter where I am, I talk about, well, here's what good looks like, but can you verify that good is actually good qualitatively and quantitatively? And how can we do that? How can we help ourselves and apply some of those principles? So this 503A plus is something I've been lecturing on for many years. And I think the FDA in the United States is getting a little piece of that. And they're kind of saying we want more people to be 503Bs, but they're not seeing the additions onto their list at the rate they'd hoped. And so there's been some discussion of trying to streamline that process a little bit better, but still making it rigorous and maybe this 503A plus or this CGMP light. I know that's a pretty crazy term, but I think we all have to do that. I think we all have to think of being better, because when whomever knocks on the door, counselor, and they say, oh, who's here today? Oh, they have 3 letters. They're on their back. What are those 3 letters? It starts with F and ends with A and it has a D in it. What are they doing here? And so let's be ready for that. Let's not only, and I always call it a baby brag book. So my wife and I have had 2 beautiful babies, and now they're beautiful adults. And now we're getting beautiful grandchildren. And so we have little brag books. Would you like to see? Here, Darshan, you want to see my grandkids? Here, let me show you, because I want to brag about them. But how about bragging about your organization's compliance? There's people that are doing things above the standard and not even telling anybody we're getting credit for it.
But let me ask you this question. As a pharmacist, and I speak to pharmacists just like you do all the time. Most pharmacists think that they are operating at the top of their license. Most pharmacists think that they are doing better than everyone else. It reminds me of that. There was a survey done apparently, and someone asked drivers, "Are you better than 50% of other drivers, or are you better than the average driver, if you will?" And something like 85% said yes. So it's very reminiscent of that, which is, are you a good pharmacist operating at the top of your license, doing the best job you possibly can? Most pharmacists I don't think I've ever met a pharmacist who said, no, I'm actually doing work. I'm not doing as well as I possibly could. So my question for you is it a hard sell to go, we can do better, when people are saying, I'm already doing great?
It is a hard sell because they're creatures of their environment. So that driver analogy is, well, I've got LA traffic, I've got New York traffic or whatever, and I'm stuck. And by the way, my measurement is I haven't had any accidents. So that's my measurement. Here, the pharmacist is saying, hey, I'm trying to do these traditional prescriptions and these non-traditional prescriptions, a compounding thing, and I'm trying to do that whole world, and I got that, and we haven't had any QREs, and a lot of them don't even know what a QRE is and the like, but we haven't had any major incidents and those kind of things. So that's their measure. They haven't had the accident. They haven't had the thing. But what I always say, my selling point is, first of all, when I teach or I sell the services per se, just by doing the services, is I have to be realistic. What always drives me a little bit batty is when you have people that are not in that world, haven't been in that world, don't understand that world, and they're sitting in some kind of crystal palace and they're saying, well, this is what you need to do. And a lot of regulars, that's where they come from. And that's what you need to do. Well, you tell me how I can do that in the course of a day. And so a lot of people get turned off and say, I can't do that. I don't have economies of scale to do that. I can't add all these bodies. I don't know what automation's even there, whatever things we can do. So you have to, it's almost like you're personalizing pharmacotherapy, but you're personalizing their compliance plan, how you do it. Because if they're pretty much a 1 or 2 person operation, you start saying, here, you have to have this 56-point quality management program, and you're going to have this, and I want 3 indicators that are relating to this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and as their hair falls out and their eyes bug out and they get the bottle of bourbon or whatever, you've got to be realistic. And so you just do little steps. And so that's kind of what I always say is, let's get compliant with the law. And then from there, let's look for opportunities. And I just finished an opportunity like that. And it's just so, it's kind of back to the Baby Bragg book. You see where they were. It's kind of like if you ever, did a sports team. I didn't know anything about soccer. And they said, hey, you're a dad, so you qualify. You're going to be a soccer coach for the little kids. Oh, no, I'm not. Well, what I did, because I was in my hospital days, I actually went with the hospital. They had a club, a soccer club. And I said, hey, if you're going to learn how to coach it, you got to learn how to play it. So just jumped in and started doing it. But with the little ones, I started thinking, okay, let's just do this, quit swarming, let's try. And you do little things. And it's the same here. You just do little things to elicit improvement. So if you have standard operating procedures, which freaks everybody out, just say, I want you just to implement these 4. Just do these 4 or do these 5, and pick them on the high volume, high risk, problem prone areas. So the critical type of things, the things you do a lot, and the things that really could affect patients pretty dramatically. So things with like thyroid, or things with narrow therapeutic indexes, and let's work on those first, So I think most of them, once they realize I'm realistic and I'm not going to shove it down their throat. But in some cases, I've gone in and I have to say, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a regulator, and sometimes I have represented regulators. But in this case, if consulting, I just say, we have a real problem here, and I think you have a choice. You either close or you make a significant investment in this, and this is what you need to do, because somebody's going to get hurt. And I've had to do that, because you can't walk away. You just can't walk away and not make that statement. But I will say, overall, I haven't seen that for years. Overall, the people that are still in it are awesome. They're doing a great job. They're trying to do better. But the naivete, oh, I never thought of that. I never thought of that. And then having somebody like yourself in with a pharmacy background and a JD coming in and saying, okay, I get all this and, about the pharmacy piece and whatever, but what is your medical legal risk here? And what is your regulatory risk? Because our landscape has changed. I mean, it's not just, again, I'm just speaking to more North America and the United States here specifically, but the boards of pharmacy weren't that active. They're more active now. And that was always the kind of the bar we always set. Well, it's not that anymore, especially with this impending MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, and whether you can ship out to other states and what percent you can ship out to other states, and if you do larger quantities than what's going to be stated in the MOU, you're going to have a problem. So it's going to be, and let's say your pharmacy is located in a tri-state area. You're in a tri-state area, young man, and if you look at that and say, how are these people going to exist? Because they got clients from here, here, here. Yeah. If these boards of pharmacies do not move in the direction the FDA would like them to, and then the FDA will now have more oversight into this.
What I think is interesting that people also forget, and this is something you and I had a very brief conversation about before we jumped on, is there is more than one regulator at play, and everyone thinks about the State Board of Pharmacy. The people who are really in it also start thinking about the FDA now. And one of the things I've started getting pulled into more and more is the Office of Inspector General and HHS and CMS. So if you are in a scenario where you're making products that are problematic, you've got to be careful about what the implication of that is. One of the I've got clients who are dealing with organizations who represent or work on behalf of, or sort of are intermediaries to your PBMs. And if you're hoping to get reimbursed for the drugs that you're compounding, What you don't want is a drug mix, an unusual drug mix that potentially suddenly gets you disbanded from what's called a PSAO
Right.
or the
Right.
PBM itself. And now, so it's one of those things that people, again, I'm seeing an uptick in this area. I'm seeing more and more conversations happening here. But the point I'm making is that we've got to be careful that we don't lose track of what's going on. So here's my question. You actually landed up, you told me you've actually helped companies in sales compliance and in addressing how these issues come up. What have you seen that has been problematic in the compounding world around sales non-compliance, if you will?
Well, again, I'm going to make a statement. It's getting far better than it used to be, and I think over time it's weeding out, the people that weren't as serious. So maybe they had a couple toes in the business and didn't have 2 feet. And I think we're getting more people with the 2 feet in there, and so things are cleaning up. In the past, I have seen a lot of situations where they're making claims, maybe something on paper or digitally, and they're making claims on something and saying this or that and the other thing. And that's one of the things I will always do. I always look at what they're claiming, what they're saying, what they're printing, what they're publishing digitally, what they're, and I'll listen to their sales team when I have an opportunity to see what they're saying and what they're doing. Because, sales, what they need to do is they just need to bring in the business, and and then operations have to sift through all the problems and say, well, we can't really do that. Oh yeah, we got to do that because this guy here and blah 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 blah. And so it's that balance. But it's more so the claims. It's also more so sometimes I have seen, and again, I just want to stress that this is relatively few and far between, is dealing with chemicals that are not even appropriately monographed. And we have to make sure that these are well documented, and whether they're part of a commercially available product that's available in the market, or they're monographed, and how are they monographed, and how's the monograph followed, how's the certificate of analysis of that particular chemical analyzed and determine that it's going to be appropriate, and looking at endotoxin levels. When you get into sterility, you're looking at heavy metals, you're looking at any other contaminants that may be there. Can we formulate it clinically, and the physiochemical stability, all those. So the claims of, hey, we can do that, I've seen people make claims that they could do a topical insulin. And I didn't say a transdermal insulin. I said a topical insulin, something that you're going to put on. You look at the molecular weight, molecular size, how many Daltons that chemical is, and all those kind of things, and how are we going to do that? So you've got to watch. And I've seen some of that. I've seen some of these claims. I've seen people saying things in terms of transmucosally. Hey, take this thing transmucosally, it'll get in there and it will do this. No, actually, the surface area is only 300 centimeters squared here, and it will only take things that are 300 Daltons or less in size. And there's not too many moieties that are that. So how do you do those? So there's a lot of claims that go in there. I guess, looking at this intermediary to the PBMs is, what's their credentialing process? In other words, how are they credentialing the people to say, well, they're filling out this big form online that's saying this, we have a quality management program, but are there any boots on the ground actually verifying that? Or are they just saying, I don't like what you're saying here, I don't like your quality management program, and we're just going to just check you off the list?
So the funny part is, it turns out that they have a bunch of criteria, some of which are disclosed to pharmacies, others which are not. And then you land up in a scenario, and I'm working through one right now, where clients are being left on the back foot because you don't know what you did wrong, and suddenly you're expected to address a problem that you didn't even know you had, and you potentially have hundreds of thousands of dollars at play. So something to consider as you continue and think about everything. But I guess the second question, I do want to pull it back a little bit, because I usually, as you know, aim for 15, 20 minutes. We're already at about double that, because you're just a great conversationalist. But let me ask you a question that goes along with it. we talked a little bit about how people are doing things wrong, but what we are, and we hinted at the idea of regulators. In the end, what is your general advice when the regulator comes in to see what you're doing wrong? How do you advise your average pharmacy to deal with a FDA walking to the door? Is it too late if the FDA walks to the door and you have no plan?
Is it too late? No, well, they got to have an absolute awareness of the steps. But you said has no plan. You have to have a plan. You have to have a plan. You have to have a standard operating procedure, and that has to be distributed amongst all of the people that are going to be exposed to this. I mean, so to have a technician that's being stared upon, whether it's in a clean room or whatever, and they have some, you should be regularly staring upon those people. You should regularly have people like myself coming in and staring upon those people and putting them through the boot camp and getting it ready. You should have people like yourself saying, okay, here's what you say you do. The first call is to verify this. The first call is to do this. The first call is to, obviously contact your attorney, but you should have a step-by-step process that says, if a regulator, but now I'm going to extend it. I know we're pressed on time, but what if OSHA walks in the door and you have hazardous drugs in there? OSHA has been waiting for this. They thought the state boards were going to do this, but they're not going to do. What if you're exhausting things out and you don't actually have your diagram of you have a HEPA filtration that's coming out, whatever, and EPA shows up? What do you do there? And then obviously the DEA and all that. So it's not just the FDA, but there's some interlinking as this goes. So I don't want to take up all the time, but yeah, is it too late? No, as long as you have a knowledge, but if you don't write it down, you're not going to do it, and you're going to panic. And the person that's making the IV is going to be dropping their hand on the work surface, and they're going to be, garbing gowning incorrectly because they're not used to the boot camp. They haven't been put through that drill. It's just this could occur, and if it occurs, call Frank. Well, Frank's in Bermuda. I don't know.
Well, Frank doesn't work there anymore because you haven't updated your SOPs.
Exactly. Just look at it. They're 2 years old, if not longer, or they're still in the cellophane that you purchased them.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
I find that to be a really interesting thing. Like I find clients, their eyes bug out when I say, do you have two separate teams? And the first question is, why do I need two separate teams? Well, because you're going to have some people in the room talking to the investigator, whether it's FDA, it's DEA, or it's someone else. But you need to have a separate team that's really addressing the questions being asked. Because the guy in the room who's being questioned is probably under a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. You don't want that person up there answering questions that are not representative of the answers that are appropriate. One of the big things I'll end up dealing with more often than not is someone who got nervous and kept talking.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you prep that? Who's allowed to speak? There are 5 people in the room, and suddenly everyone feels like that's the moment they get to say they were part of an FDA inspection. So everyone wants to have an opinion, and everyone wants to be the expert, except you didn't deal with anything associated with that product or that specific batch or anything like that.
Exactly.
So you need to have your team. You might have just 1 or 2 people just following, answering specific questions. So you have a spokesperson, for example, but you have an entire team in the back going, FDA asked for this question. What is the answer?
Right.
And you go back, you look at your own roots. You look at your own sort of records. The FDA says they want this batch record. Don't give them a batch record binder with every single batch record in the world. Mm-hmm. You need to go back, find out specifically what they're asking for. Yeah. Give them just that. Mm-hmm. And if you're responsive to the request, and never hide anything, that's never the goal. You should always be responsive to the FDA or any other government agency. The fact is, in the end, the government's doing the right job, which is trying to help patients. However, that does not in any scenario mean that I need to put my neck down and go, I wonder what they'll find. Well, you might as well give them the pieces they're asking for and then decide, let them figure out what they want next. You don't have to be guiding them.
No. You just need to direct them to a resource. But the problem is as we all know, the regulators, they don't always know what good looks like in the environment they're in. They may know what good looks like in the CGMP world, but maybe you cross state lines and you look like you're a manufacturer, and now you're interstate, and they say, well, we got jurisdiction over you, and so we're going to go in. And they sense as a USP driven organization, but they see things that might reflect on CGMP, and they're going to rate your good to be much better than you feel your USP guidelines states.
So that's where I would go. First of all, let them raise the question they have. If they feel that way, fine, raise it. We'll address it. But
Yep.
I don't want the random dude. I don't want the owner.
Nope.
I don't want the technician addressing that question. I
Right.
want someone who knows exactly what the answer is, answering the specific question being asked or the concern being raised, saying, okay, you think this, we think you're wrong because here's the regulation that we looked at. Here's what we followed. If you think we're wrong, you need to tell us why. So that way you're shutting them down, not from a position of this is my expectation, but this is what the regs say.
Yeah, very good. Well, and having an organization like yours supporting them. So I always say you need to have your circle, your sphere. And so I look at Gates and all the power Gates has around. Again, Gates has the power for the intermediaries to the PBMs. They have that. You know, you're the legal. You got the legal. You got subject matter experts. We got FDA people. We got DEA people. We got OSHA people. You know, just having that team to call and say, okay, we need a plan. We need a sphere, and we need to know when we pull on that sphere. And I like the drill that you're doing is saying, okay, you know, here's, if there's 483s and there's things written, we need to learn from them, because you know what? They're going to occur in our world. And so those are the drills. And say, okay, you come in here and what do you see? And they're saying, well, this would be a 483. You did this and this and this. Okay, what if they say this? What are you going to do? Who's your spokesperson, and what's the spokesperson going to do?
And let's say they're saying, so first of all, typically speaking, they aren't going to come in and say, here's your 483. They're typically going to
No. I'm saying we're going to look at past 483s
100%, but
other organizations.
Oh, I wasn't suggesting you said that. I was suggesting that they're not going to come in telling you what they're going to do. Typically, as you walk through, as you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. They're going to start coming in and saying, here are my concerns, here are my concerns, here are my concerns. And what you need to be able to do is either address those concerns right there and go, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong. Or you need to go, you're right, and here are the steps, and we will be taking appropriate steps to fix it. Don't try to fix it right that second, because the truth is that if you try to fix it right that second, A, you're probably wrong because you don't know all the facts. And B, even if you're right, you're probably going to overcommit and go say things like, I'll be done in 10 days. The fact is that training takes 25 days to do. And you need to get other things in place before you can do that training. So you've overcommitted, and now the FDA or anyone else is going to hold you to words that you said, even though you didn't know what you were talking about.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
anyways.
Yeah, it's a panic situation, but see, let's be preventative. And the term I always use is, we've been firefighters for so many years. Can we stop that? And can we stop the fire? Let's prevent the fire, and we won't have to be firefighters. God bless them.
To put it in a different way, stop using asbestos to put out fires.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Anyways, we can keep going obviously for hours. So let me sort of do a few questions for you before we jump off. What is a question you'd like to ask the audience based on what we've discussed?
What is their perspective? And obviously you have a broad audience. You probably got pharma folks that saying, oh, this compounding is so bad and all that. What is your perspective of compounding? Is it a bunch of charlatans that are just out there to make a bunch of money and they're just popping all things? Or, you're going to get my bias, is it more personalized medicine that we can individualize dosage forms, delivery systems, routes of delivery, and we can actually assess those patients and be specific to the patients? Because precision medicine is there, and if compounding goes away, we're going to miss a whole lot of opportunity that we can do unique adaptations specific to patients, and we do it all the time in the therapeutic. So what's their feeling? Is it charlatans? Is it just a bunch of people going rogue out there? Or is it people that are trying to do a good job and just need a little more guidance? Or is it a great industry to get into? I mean, you look at drug shortages and all those things. What are some of the other things?
I'll answer the question first because I usually like my audience to at least hear what my answer would be, but I'd be curious what they're saying as well. I like to be the first one to do it, even though I sometimes don't like putting my own opinion out there. But my answer would be I think that compounding pharmacy definitely has a role, and the role is addressing the specific needs of a patient. However, I think that we have rogue pharmacists out there and rogue pharmacies out there. And what they're doing is they're basically going, can I bypass the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act? Can I go in there and basically do things that are not kosher? And I know they're not kosher. And that concerns me. I think that there's and I think we saw an example of that where someone just got greedy, and that was your NECC tragedy. The controls weren't in place, the quality wasn't in place, and you had, I think it was 76 people or 72 people, something like that, died. It was higher. What was it in the end?
Last I saw was 80.
Oh, was it 80? Okay, I didn't know
but there's people that are still seeding. They still have the plaque, and when their immune system goes down, it's
yeah. So I think you have that group. I think in the end, for example, if you're doing vet medicine, the truth is we're not going to develop drugs for dogs, and we're not going to develop drugs for horses because it's just, the money's just not there, and the volume's just not
But
there.
maybe delivery systems. I will say drugs, yes, likely not. But
well, I'm taking it twofold. I'm taking the drugs. The money's not there for the drugs in terms of testing to specifically know safety and efficacy, because you're just not going to do the testing.
Oh, you mean to market and patent and yeah.
However, I think that the fact is that they still need. I mean, I love my dog, and I think that and people love their horses and the like. And the point is that we still got to make something that they will take.
Yeah.
So I think compounding fits a role there. I think that there are things like there are disease states where the cost of treating the patient is so high because there's so few patients who are affected that you'll never do the research. And if you don't do the research, the patients never get treated. And in those cases, you need compounding pharmacy. So I think that there's a balance. And I think that we, as a profession, have to do a better job addressing these needs and making sure the needs of the patient are met while aiming for a higher standard than we've held ourselves to. I think that's exactly the point you're talking about. Which is
it is.
Better.
And I think that they folks need to be open and say, I'm going to bring a subject matter expert in or some third party accrediting organization and just say, hey, shake me down. I want to voluntarily submit to this, shake me down. Because I always say, you're better off let me shake you down before a regulator that can shut you down. And so
that would be my first question. Two more questions for you before we start wrapping up a little bit. My next question for you is, what made you happy in the last week?
Seeing a objective measurement of improvement come back on one of my clients.
Oh, good for you. Okay. Very, very cool. What did you learn in the last month?
Oh, it is such a dynamic world. So something that's really sticking out there. I actually try to keep up with therapeutics well, and I actually don't really want to say it out loud because I want everybody to kind of get an idea thinking, hey, this could be utilized. But there's a particular therapeutics that's out there, and it may be favorable in regards to prostate cancer and various things like that. So I always try to keep abreast of that. That's kind of in the little endocrinology world because, obviously there's folks, not me or you, but that need testosterone eventually. And when they think, oh, that's prostate cancer or whatever kind of thing. But looking at some of the evidence, and now we're getting more numbers of people and that kind of thing. So always try to keep abreast of that. Also hoping that we can get some agreement on the MOU and we can kind of get some more realistic approaches on this because there are some very good core centers of excellence that distribute to other states.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, if you're in the state, support your state that you're in and do everything you can, but can you develop that center of excellence in order to take care of people in that state? And maybe not. And so I think we got to figure it out without going to the big old 503B side of things. So I'm hoping that there's a little bit of light on that, but that's going to be tough. And the other thing is can we maintain some of these therapies in regards to, I hate the term bioidentical hormone replacement. It's not replacing it, and you're restoring it. And bioidentical is out there anyway. I mean, there's already products that are bioidentical, estradiol and whatever. It's to me, it's biomimetic hormone restoration. You're restoring back with biomimetic type of chemicals, and you're doing it with different delivery systems, dosage form. But I hope that area will maintain, and that people won't get involved in that and say that's a problematic area. It's a very highly efficacious area, and when done right, it can be highly specific to a patient. And pain management. Are we going to keep pumping in opiates, or are we going to actually try to approach the pain peripherally and stop the peripheral sensitization before it gets into central sensitization? And we can do things in the peripherally without having to use. We can be opiate sparing. I've got evidence of opiate sparing techniques that we can utilize to spare or even eliminate opiates. So all of that. And so there's been a lot of movement on that, and I've been teaching that and researching for this. So let's hold it. Let's hold it together, you guys.
I'm going to add one more thing that that I think has popped up, which is I thought it was interesting. Yesterday's news, I believe, was that Walmart finally has a cost-effective insulin. I think it was like $45 or something. I think they put out there. I think it was done with Novo Nordisk, is my recollection, but I could be wrong about both of the number.
That's a very good angle for them. It really is. I mean, just stepping in and saying, okay, we're going to put capital to this thing.
I'm just surprised that Novo Nordisk didn't try to do it on their own, because they could have, whoever does it, and now it's going to be Walmart.
But go to your specialty. I mean, their specialty is production, and the distribution side, let it up to,
I guess,
one of the distribution kings or queens. I think Sam was a king, but Sam Walt.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Sam in charge anymore, right? So
no, I'm just teasing.
Well, Sam's passed away, but still.
Yes, he has.
But the other point, the other question, what I'd like to do next is summarize. So I think during this conversation, we landed up talking a little bit about inspection readiness. We talked a little bit about the type of competency, whether it's operational, clinical. We didn't really get into that too much. Hopefully that's something we discuss the next time around. We talked a little bit about PSALs, and we talked a little bit about what those look like and what the implications of sort of compliance across the board. We started off talking a little bit about international travel and the type of stuff you've been doing, and how exciting that's been, creating new centers of excellence across the world. The ones that really popped up in my head as you were mentioning them was the UK, Germany, Philippines, and Australia. I know you've dealt with several more, but I just thought those were interesting to start off with. You talked a little bit about some of the limitations that regulators have as they've been doing sort of virtual inspections. Things like, oh, take your cell phone, walk through my clean room. Well, can you walk through a clean room with a cell phone? But some of the lines that you sort of mentioned that stuck out at me were things like, good is universal. So if good is universal, let's aim for good at the very least.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned this other line that I thought was really interesting: achievable principles of CGMB, and how that would be useful for 503As to aim for the next level, to do better for their own patients. And then we talked a little bit about who hires you. We talked a little bit about why they hire you and why it's important as you're traveling internationally. We talked very briefly about sales compliance, and it's an area that's near and dear to my heart. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you about that as well pretty soon. But did I miss? Oh, we were going to talk about the differences between 503 and 503B a little bit more, and getting into mail order and specialty pharmacies and the implications thereof. But did I miss anything at this point?
No, I think you did. I just want everybody to recognize that it's not just the state board and the FDA. You got to look at everything, and you got to look and you have to be regulatorily ready, and you have to understand and listen to the counselor, the attorney here saying, hey, you got to drill this thing out. You got to be ready. You got to have a plan, because one misstep can be misery.
It is. Ken, how can people reach you if they have questions?
Yeah, thank you. Contact Gates Healthcare Consulting, and the phone number. Can I give it? Can I
Please,
say?
please.
This is the corporate office, so it's 978-646-0091, and you can go on to on the web. It's gateshealthcare.com, and you can click on there, and you can send a message or what have you. So send a message to me. I'd say if you're interested in our services, just call them up, ask for the COO. He'll talk to you directly. Dan Parisi, even the president will talk to you. It's great. Assuming he'll be in the office, because he usually is, but give him a call, and we'd love to work with you. If we can help you in any way, just give us a call. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sounds great. And if you'd like to reach me, feel free to reach out to me at DarshanTalks on Twitter, or go to our website, DarshanTalks.com. If you like the podcast, please share it. Ken would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you. Please subscribe, please comment, and tell us why Ken's awesome, and when you'd like to bring him back, because I'm already talking about bringing him back soon. So thanks, everyone. Thank you for staying on, Ken.
Thanks, Darshan. Appreciate it.